Imagine the face of a queen, white as alabaster, lips red as blood, eyes dark and unreadable. She stands motionless, draped in pearls and jewels, a figure carved from myth. To the world, she is Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, untouchable, immortal, eternal. But every mask hides a crack. And behind Elizabeth's flawless portraits lies a story far more unsettling. The story of a child who lost her mother before she could even speak her name. A teenager shaken awake at dawn by a man who should never have touched her. A woman who would spend her life refusing every hand offered in love because she had already learned what intimacy could cost. Her reign became legend. 45 years of victory, spectacle, and survival. But her throne was not built only on strategy or brilliance. It was built on scars, scars invisible to her subjects, but etched deep inside her. From the corridors where her mother's ghost seemed to linger, to the locked chamber where her stepfather's footsteps stopped just short of her bed, Elizabeth carried with her the shadows of every betrayal, every fear, every rumor. These shadows never left her. They followed her into her portraits, into her speeches, into the silent hours of her final nights, when she refused to lie down whispering, "If I sleep, I shall never wake." This is not the tale of a queen who freely chose solitude. It is the tale of a woman pushed into it by death, by scandal, by secrets no subject could ever be allowed to see. The Virgin Queen was not born from purity. She was born from wounds. And so the question that still echoes today is this: was Elizabeth's image of eternal virginity a triumph of genius, or a mask to cover traumas too dangerous to reveal? To find the answer, we must peel back the portraits, open the locked doors, and step into the shadows she tried to bury. Only then can we understand the changing shape of queenship, from a frightened girl in Thomas Seymour's household to the lonely throne that would define her life. And once you see what lies beneath the mask, you cannot look away. Before Elizabeth became a queen, draped in pearls, she was a child overshadowed by whispers. Her earliest memories were not of crowns or glory, but of absence and loss. She was born in September 1533, a child the court had expected to be a son. Instead, her arrival was met with disappointment. Her father, Henry VIII, longed for a male heir, and her mother, Anne Boleyn, had staked her life on producing one. Elizabeth's very existence carried the sting of failure. When she was not yet 3 years old, her world collapsed. Anne Boleyn was accused of adultery and treason, and in the cold month of May 1536, she was led to the scaffold at the Tower of London. Elizabeth never saw her again. One day, she was a princess. The next, she was a bastard. Her titles stripped, her place in the royal household erased. Imagine the silence in those early years, the absence of a mother's voice, the sudden change of servants, the subtle shift in how people addressed her. Even as a toddler, Elizabeth must have sensed it, the way affection turned into distance, the way security gave way to suspicion. The lesson repeated itself. Catherine Howard, another of Henry's young wives, was executed for adultery when Elizabeth was just 8. Again, a woman who should have been a figure of protection became a warning instead. Marriage, in Elizabeth's childhood, was never a promise of safety. It was a path to betrayal, disgrace, and death. And yet, in the shadows of these losses, something else was growing. Elizabeth proved to be remarkably intelligent. Tutors discovered a child who devoured books, mastered languages, and debated theology with the sharpness of an adult. While the court marked her as illegitimate, she was already carving a different kind of inheritance, an inner fortress built from knowledge, caution, and observation. Still, brilliance could not shield her from the dangers of being young, female, and royal, in a family where wives were discarded like broken glass. Each stepmother who entered and exited her life left Elizabeth with a sharper awareness. Women close to the king were never secure. Affection could become accusation. A crown could become a death sentence. The home itself became a place of unease. The palaces were filled with echoes, laughter that could turn to weeping, music that could give way to silence, footsteps that could vanish overnight. Elizabeth was surrounded by rooms haunted not by spirits, but by memory, each corridor lined with stories of women undone. It was in this atmosphere that Elizabeth's instincts began to form. She learned to measure her words, to weigh every glance, to read the unspoken signals in those around her. She learned to keep secrets, even as a child. She learned that survival meant watchfulness. By the time she reached her teenage years, she was already living as though the world was a stage, and she, a careful actress. But nothing in her childhood could prepare her for what came next. For in the household of her last stepmother, Catherine Parr, Elizabeth would encounter Thomas Seymour, a man whose reckless ambition and dangerous intimacy would leave her with scars that no crown could ever erase. The frightened child was about to step into her first scandal, and the girl who had grown up in silence would soon discover how much louder whispers could become. The Tudor court spoke in whispers, and those whispers followed Elizabeth from her teenage years until her death. Each rumor was like a shadow cast against the wall, hinting at something hidden, something dangerous. The first shadow was Thomas Seymour. Servants told stories of him slipping into Elizabeth's chambers at dawn, laughing too loudly, touching too freely. They spoke of him cutting her gown to ribbons while she stood half-clothed, of playful wrestling that carried an edge of menace. To some, it was reckless flirtation. To others, it was the violation of a girl who had no choice but to laugh nervously while calculating how to survive. When Seymour was executed for treason, Elizabeth was questioned. Did she conspire with him? Did she welcome his advances? Her answers were careful, measured, almost chilling for a girl of 15. She denied what she must, admitted only what could not be avoided. She learned then that survival meant mastering silence. Yet the rumors never died. They clung to her like smoke, invisible but suffocating. As she grew older, a second shadow appeared. Robert Dudley. He was her companion, her favorite, the man whose presence was constant through her life. Their closeness sparked endless speculation. Did the Virgin Queen secretly long for him? Did she refuse all other suitors because her heart was already taken? And when Dudley's wife, Amy Robsart, was found dead at the bottom of a staircase, whispers turned poisonous. The court buzzed with questions. Had Elizabeth planned it? Had Dudley cleared the path to her bed? No evidence ever proved it, but scandal does not require proof. It only requires silence, and Elizabeth's silence fed the flames. Then there were the rumors about her body. Some said she was deformed, that scars or sickness had left her unfit for marriage. Others claimed she could not bear children, her womb barren as her throne, and in the most grotesque tale of all, some insisted she was not even a woman. The Bisley Boy legend, centuries old, yet still alive today, imagines that the real Elizabeth died as a child and was secretly replaced by a boy to avoid her father's wrath. No historian believes it, yet its persistence reveals the unease she inspired. A woman who ruled alone was so unnatural that people would rather believe she was a disguised impostor. Each rumor carried a psychological weight. The Seymour scandal taught her intimacy was dangerous. The Dudley affair showed her affection could become scandal overnight. The stories about her body revealed that her very identity was always under attack. She could never simply be Elizabeth. She had to be a mask, a symbol, a myth, and that is what she became. She let the rumors swirl, never confirming, never denying. She understood that mystery itself was a weapon. The less people knew, the more they projected. She transformed herself into the Virgin Queen, untouchable, unknowable. Her private wounds hidden beneath public spectacle. But rumors leave echoes. Even today, when we look at her portraits, The stiff white face, the distant eyes, the painted perfection, we cannot help but wonder, what did she hide? Was she scarred? Was she lonely? Or was she simply tired of being a woman whose every glance could be twisted into gossip? The truth lies buried in fragments, testimonies, portraits, letters, and if we read them carefully, they do not only tell us about a queen, they tell us about a woman who lived her entire life beneath the shadow of rumor, never free, never fully seen. But sometimes, the fragments reveal more than silence. They hint at evidence that Elizabeth, in her careful denials, may have revealed more than she intended. History remembers Elizabeth in fragments, scraps of parchment, painted faces, words recorded under pressure. Each piece of evidence offers a glimpse, but never the whole truth. What survives tells us as much about what she endured as about what she tried to hide. The most striking records come from the investigation into Thomas Seymour. In 1549, Elizabeth's servants, Cat Ashley and Thomas Parry, were interrogated. Their words are preserved in cold ink. They described Seymour rising before dawn, slipping into Elizabeth's room, sometimes striking her playfully, sometimes embracing her. They admitted to seeing him cut her gown into 100 pieces. These testimonies were not rumors, they were sworn statements. And yet, the line between childish play and predation remains blurred, leaving us to imagine what Elizabeth felt in those moments. Fear, confusion, calculation. Elizabeth herself was also questioned. She denied impropriety with a precision beyond her years. "I never suspected any such matter," she said. Notice her choice of words, not an outright rejection, but a careful shield. She never accused, never confessed. In that silence lies the voice of a girl who had learned already that truth was dangerous and survival depended on restraint. The record ends with Seymour's execution, but the stain lingered. To read those interrogations is to see the foundation of her lifelong mask. Control, denial, the art of answering without revealing. Another form of evidence comes not from words, but from images. Elizabeth's portraits are among the most studied in history. The Darnley portrait shows her as a young woman, still human, still vulnerable. But as the decades passed, her likeness transformed. The Armada portrait, the Rainbow portrait. These are not faces of flesh. They are masks, white as plaster, eyes fixed and ageless, hair golden under heavy wigs. Wrinkles and scars vanish, replaced by symbols of purity and power. Why the transformation? Some records hint at the truth. Elizabeth contracted smallpox in 1562. She survived, but not unmarked. Later accounts describe pitted skin, thinning hair, blackened teeth from years of sugar. Servants whispered she kept her chambers dimly lit, that she shunned mirrors, that her closest attendants covered reflective surfaces so she would never be forced to face what time had carved into her. Yet in portraits, she remains forever young, forever flawless. The contrast between written accounts and painted faces is itself a form of evidence, proof of a queen determined to erase her own humanity. Even in death, evidence eludes us. When Elizabeth finally collapsed in March 1603, no autopsy was performed. No physician's notes describe her body. Her coffin was sealed. Her tomb closed in Westminster Abbey. The silence is deafening. For a woman whose body had been the subject of endless speculation, was she barren? Was she scarred? Was she even truly a woman? The decision to keep her corpse unseen feels deliberate. It is as if her final command was to preserve the mask even in the grave. Other scraps of evidence raise questions but offer no answers. Letters between Elizabeth and Robert Dudley are almost non-existent, though foreign ambassadors wrote obsessively about their intimacy. Was this coincidence or careful destruction? Amy Robsart's inquest records are missing, fueling centuries of suspicion about her death. Court diaries describe Elizabeth pacing through sleepless nights, refusing to rest. Did they witness paranoia, or something more spectral haunting her. What is most haunting about these records is not what they say, but what they leave unsaid. The interrogations preserve a scandal, but not Elizabeth's private thoughts. The portraits show perfection, but not the pain beneath. The sealed tomb hides the very body that might have silenced centuries of speculation. Each gap in the archive feels intentional, as though Elizabeth herself orchestrated the disappearance of truth. And so the evidence becomes a mirror. We peer into it, hoping to see the woman behind the queen, but instead we see our own doubts and projections. Was she scarred or radiant, victim or strategist, lonely or triumphant? Every record answers one question and leaves behind another. But if fragments reveal so much, what do the silences conceal? Were they the natural decay of time, or were they erased deliberately to protect the image of the Virgin Queen? If it was deliberate, then Elizabeth's greatest masterpiece may not have been her reign, but her secrecy. And secrecy, once sealed in marble, becomes a breeding ground for something stranger phenomena that history cannot fully explain. Some truths about Elizabeth refuse to stay within the lines of ordinary history. They slip into the realm of the unexplained stories that hover between rumor and haunting, phenomena that speak less of fact than of fear. The first mystery was her body itself. For nearly 50 years, Elizabeth never married, never bore a child, never allowed anyone to claim her in the most ordinary way a woman might be claimed. To her enemies, this silence was proof of a secret. Some whispered she was barren. Others believed she carried hidden scars. And the most grotesque rumor of all insisted she was not a woman at all, but a boy, disguised since childhood, the infamous Bisley Boy legend. No evidence supports such claims, and yet they persist, century after century. Why? Because Elizabeth herself never allowed the truth to be seen. She never permitted an autopsy. Her tomb remained sealed. No one outside her most trusted attendants ever saw her naked in death. The absence of proof became its own phenomenon. Her face, too, became a mystery. Courtiers described blackened teeth, thinning hair, skin pitted by disease. Yet portraits painted her as timeless, flawless, ageless. The mask of youth was so convincing that some believed she had defied nature itself, that her appearance was touched by alchemy or witchcraft. The truth may have been wigs and powders, but the effect was uncanny. In the half-light of her court, with torches flickering against her painted face, she must have seemed like a ghost haunting her own body. And then there was her final decline. In the spring of 1603, Elizabeth refused to lie down. She stood for hours, leaning on cushions, eyes fixed on the shadows, whispering that if she closed her eyes, she would never open them again. Days passed. She would not eat. She would not sleep. When her counsel begged her to rest, she stared at them with the silence of one who knew her fate. Witnesses swore she seemed to sense her own death. How could she have known so precisely? Was it prophecy? Or the exhaustion of a woman who had carried her mask for too long? When she finally collapsed, her body was swiftly hidden. The coffin was closed, the grave sealed. No autopsy, no farewell view, no chance to silence the centuries of speculation. It was as if the Virgin Queen chose to leave behind not just a throne, but a riddle. The unexplained did not end with her burial. At Hampton Court, visitors still report the rustle of unseen skirts, the faint echo of footsteps pacing in empty chambers. Some claim to hear the sigh of a woman at the end of a long corridor, only to find no one there. At the Tower of London, where Elizabeth had once been imprisoned as a young woman, guards have spoken of a shadow drifting near the cells, tall and silent, crowned in the dim light. Even her successors were not free of her ghost. James I is said to have dreamed of her shortly after taking the throne, the vision of Elizabeth standing over him, unspeaking, unblinking, as if to remind him that he walked in a kingdom built on her sacrifice. Sailors told tales of her apparition, appearing in storms, a pale figure guiding English ships through wind and lightning. Skeptics dismiss these stories as superstition, but what makes them powerful is not their factual truth. It is the way they echo Elizabeth's life. She was a woman who became a symbol, a body turned into a battlefield, a queen who lived half in rumor and half in myth. Why should death have been any different? The unexplained phenomena surrounding Elizabeth are not proof of magic, nor of imposture, nor of ghosts. They are proof of something deeper, that her story was never allowed to be ordinary. The cracks in her mask invited invention. The silences in her record begged to be filled. And once a legend is born, it refuses to die. Perhaps that is why she endures not only as a monarch of flesh and blood, but as a presence, a riddle, a ghost that history itself cannot lay to rest. But while the shadows of her life linger in haunted corridors and whispered legends, her image has also been reborn in another place, in modern culture where each age reshapes her in its own likeness. Elizabeth's life ended in 1603, but her shadow never did. If anything, it grew. In the centuries since, her image has been polished, fractured, and reinvented, until the woman herself seems almost lost beneath the weight of legend. Writers of her own age cast her as a goddess. To poets, she was Astrea, the Virgin of Justice returned to earth. Painters turned her into a living emblem. Eyes that never aged, skin that glowed like porcelain, gowns stitched with suns, moons, and stars. The lonely woman became eternal symbol, less human than myth. Later generations reshaped her in new ways. To Victorians, obsessed with morality, Elizabeth's refusal to marry made her a curiosity, a woman at odds with natural womanhood. To early feminists, she became a heroine, the ruler who refused to let any man claim her body or her crown. To conspiracy theorists, she remained the subject of grotesque speculation. The Bisley Boy legend, the mask of youth, the whispers of deformity. Each interpretation says less about Elizabeth than it does about the age retelling her story. Cinema has made her immortal again and again. Flora Robson gave her stern majesty. Bette Davis painted her as fierce and tragic. Cate Blanchett revealed both brilliance and fragility, and Margot Robbie showed the haunting decay beneath the mask. No two versions agree, because no single version can capture her. The mystery that cloaked her in life continues to feed the imagination of every new generation. Her legacy also haunts the very idea of queenship. Later, monarchs have been measured against her solitude. Queen Victoria borrowed the aura of female power bound to duty. Elizabeth II was often compared to her namesake, enduring scandal and scrutiny with an iron mask of composure. Both were judged through the shadow of the first Elizabeth, as though the shape she carved was impossible to escape. Yet what lingers most is not her triumphs, but her silence. The sealed coffin, the absence of an heir. The body never shown, never explained. Tourists at Westminster Abbey still pass her tomb and whisper not about her speeches or her victories, but about what was never revealed. Was she scarred? Was she lonely? Was she ever truly free? Perhaps that is her greatest legacy. Not answers, but questions. Elizabeth left us a mirror into which each age peers, seeing power, pain, beauty, and fear reflected back. For some she is a victim, for others a strategist, for many an icon. But always, she remains incomplete, a puzzle with missing pieces. The story of the Virgin Queen is not only about what she was, but about what we still cannot know. And as long as the tomb remains sealed, the silence itself will echo louder than any proclamation. But silence cannot hold forever. Sooner or later, we must ask, do we leave her mysteries intact, or do we dare to break the seal? We have traced Elizabeth's life from a child born under the shadow of her mother's execution to a teenager caught in the dangerous orbit of Thomas Seymour, to a woman who built an empire of solitude. Every step was shaped not only by power, but by wounds. The story of Elizabeth is the story of masks, the white face powdered into perfection, the carefully chosen words that denied just enough, but never too much. The portraits that showed eternity, while her body withered in private. She became a queen who ruled the world, but she could never escape the shadows that ruled her, and still, her tomb remains sealed. Behind the marble of Westminster Abbey lies the final mask. Was it meant to protect her secrets forever? Or does it conceal truths too fragile to be shown? A body scarred by disease, perhaps. A figure transformed by time into something far from the portraits. Or maybe nothing remarkable at all, only the silence she demanded. That silence has become part of her power. For centuries, it has kept her alive in rumor, legend, and imagination. Every unanswered question has made her more than human, an icon, a ghost, a riddle. So what do we make of Elizabeth? Was her solitude a brilliant strategy that turned weakness into strength? Or was it the prison built by trauma, a fortress that kept out not only danger, but love itself? And more haunting still, if her coffin were opened tomorrow, would you want the truth revealed? Or should she be allowed to keep her secrets, the last fragments of humanity hidden beneath the mask of Gloriana? The answer is not mine to give, it belongs to you. Tell me, do you believe Elizabeth's legend was a triumph or a tragedy? Was she a woman who mastered her scars, or one forever ruled by them? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue uncovering the shadows of history together. And if you found yourself drawn into the mystery of the Virgin Queen, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others who search for the stories behind the portraits. Because here, in the Hidden History Vault, every mask hides a wound, and every wound leaves behind a ghost.